The king's last will, a human's impossible inheritance. The grand hall of the Xel'Vani High Council was filled with the most powerful beings in the galaxy. Noble lords, military generals, and diplomats from 100 worlds had gathered to witness the reading of King Selfar's last will. The Xel'Vani Empire, one of the most advanced and feared civilizations in the galaxy, had lost its ruler. And now, everyone waited to see who would inherit his legacy. At the center of the hall, 4 alien princesses stood tall, their shimmering silver robes reflecting the golden lights above. Each of them had been raised as a potential heir, trained in diplomacy, war, and leadership. Velkera, Silenus, Jari, and Selva, the 4 daughters of the king, were the pride of the empire. Velkera, the eldest, smirked as she glanced at her sisters. "The will is just a formality," she whispered. "Father surely left the throne to me." Silenus, the second-born, flicked her violet hair back. "We'll see, sister. The council may have a say in this." The hall quieted as Lord Veros, the royal executor, stepped forward. His deep voice echoed across the chamber. "By the order of King Selfar, his final will shall now be revealed." A holographic scroll materialized above him, ancient words glowing in golden light. The tension in the room grew thick as he read the first lines. "To my beloved daughters, you are my pride and my legacy. The Xel'Vani Empire must remain strong, but I have chosen a different path for your future." Velkera frowned. "Different path," she muttered. The nobles murmured among themselves. This was not the traditional way of naming a successor. The king should have declared one of his daughters as the new empress. Instead, he continued, "As of this moment, all 4 of my daughters are legally bonded to my chosen heir. They shall serve him, follow his leadership, and protect his claim to the empire." The hall fell silent. Then chaos erupted. Velkera's eyes burned with fury. "What?" Silenus scoffed. "This is madness. Who could father possibly have chosen?" The nobles shouted in confusion. Who was this mystery heir? Lord Veros took a deep breath and spoke the name that no one expected. "The rightful heir, by the king's decree, is a human. His name is Ethan Carter." Gasps filled the hall. Velkera clenched her fists. "A human." Silenus and Jari exchanged incredulous looks, while Selva, the youngest, simply stared in disbelief. Across the chamber, standing near the back, Ethan Carter felt the blood drain from his face. "Wait, what?" A human's confusion. Ethan had come to this ceremony as a mere observer. As a human mercenary and diplomat, he had worked with the Xel'Vani before, but he had no political ties to them. He was just a guy from Earth who had done some missions across the galaxy. Now suddenly, he was being named as the heir to an empire. And the owner of 4 alien princesses. This had to be a mistake. A royal guard stepped forward and addressed him directly. "Ethan Carter, you have been chosen by King Selfar. Step forward and claim your position." Ethan's heart pounded. He hesitated, then looked around. The nobles, the warlords, the princesses, everyone was staring at him with shock, rage, or amusement. "Oh, this is bad." He took an uneasy step forward. Okay, listen. I think there's been a mix-up. I barely knew the king. I don't want to own anyone, and I definitely don't want an empire." The princesses laughed. Velkera crossed her arms. "You hear that? Even the human doesn't want this ridiculous inheritance." Silenus smirked. "Maybe he understands his place. Beneath us." Jari chuckled. "I say we let him keep the title, just for fun." Imagine the look on the other empires' faces when they hear a human is the new ruler of the Xel'Vani. Ethan gritted his teeth. He had faced death on a dozen battlefields, fought off alien mercenaries, and survived in the most dangerous parts of the galaxy. But he had never been humiliated quite like this. The king's will is absolute. Lord Veros raised a hand, silencing the whispers. "The king's will cannot be undone. The AI executor has confirmed its authenticity. By law, this inheritance is final. Velkera stepped forward, her glowing blue eyes full of fury. Then we challenge it. Lord Veros shook his head. There is no challenge. The will has already been sealed into the Empire's legal records. The princesses looked at each other in shock. There was no escape from this. Ethan, meanwhile, felt like the floor was disappearing under his feet. He had just become the most wanted man in the galaxy. Velkera's voice was low, full of cold anger. This is not over, human. Ethan sighed, rubbing his temples. Yeah, I figured. The shockwaves begin. The news spread like wildfire. Across the Empire, people were outraged, amused, or horrified. Other galactic factions saw this as a sign of weakness. Within hours, assassins were already being sent after Ethan, and deep within the Selvani palace, the four princesses sat in silence, realizing that their fates had just been stolen from them. They would never serve a human. They would never belong to him. Or so they thought. We would rather die than belong to a human. Ethan Carter stood in the center of the Selvani High Council Hall, feeling like he had just stepped into a nightmare. A few minutes ago, he had been a nobody in this grand political game, a simple human mercenary and diplomat who had worked in the shadows of greater powers. Now, he was the heir to one of the most feared empires in the galaxy, and apparently the legal master of 4 alien princesses who despised him. The weight of 1,000 stares pressed down on him, some filled with disbelief, others with open hatred. Ethan had seen battlefields covered in blood. He had faced pirates, warlords, and even Black Ops assassins. But this was way worse. He cleared his throat. Look, I don't know what kind of joke this is, but I'm not interested. Find someone else. The hall fell into dead silence. Then Velkera laughed. It was a sharp, cold laugh, filled with mockery. The eldest princess, proud and regal, took a step forward, her golden armor glinting under the glowing lights. You see, she said, addressing the nobles, even the human himself knows this is a mistake. Her sisters smirked. Silenus, the second-born, leaned against her ornate staff. It's almost pitiful, really. A creature from a primitive world, suddenly thrown into the politics of an empire beyond his understanding. Jari, the third, let out a slow sigh. Father must have lost his mind before he died. Zelva, the youngest, remained silent, her piercing violet eyes scanning Ethan with curiosity instead of outright hatred. Ethan exhaled sharply. Okay, listen, ladies, let's get one thing straight. I didn't ask for this, so if there's some loophole that gets me out of this mess, I'll take it. Right now. Lord Veros, the royal executor, shook his head. There is no loophole, human. The king's will is absolute. Velkera's smile vanished. Then we'll make one. She turned sharply, motioning to her sisters. We challenge this decision. Veros sighed. Denied. The nobles murmured in excitement. Ethan raised an eyebrow. Let me guess. If I fail, I lose my inheritance and can go back to my normal life. Veros smirked. No, if you fail, you die. Ethan groaned. Of course, because why would anything in my life be simple? Silenus grinned. Oh, this is perfect. Let him take the trial. He won't last 5 minutes. Jari laughed. A human against the royal champion. He'll be dead before he even knows what happened. Velkera remained silent, but for the first time, there was uncertainty in her eyes. Zelva, the youngest, tilted her head. What if he wins? The question sent a ripple through the room. Silenus snorted. He won't. Zelva frowned. But if he does? Velkera's fists tightened. If he wins, we may have a bigger problem than we thought. Ethan's last thought. Ethan was escorted to the training grounds, where his trial of worthiness would take place. He didn't know who he was about to fight, but he had a feeling it was someone, or something, that could tear him apart. His entire future, and maybe even Earth's fate, rested on this one fight. As he cracked his knuckles, he muttered under his breath, "All right, Ethan. Time to prove that humans don't go down so easily." Ethan's first challenge. Proving he's not a joke. The Selveni Royal Training Grounds were a massive, circular arena carved into the heart of the capital. It was an ancient structure where warriors had fought and died for centuries. Today, it would serve as the stage for something unprecedented. A human would fight for his right to rule. Ethan Carter stood in the middle of the arena, his heart pounding. He had been in tough spots before, but this was insane. Around him, thousands of Selveni nobles, soldiers, and spectators had gathered. Some cheered for his imminent defeat, others just watched with curiosity. The four princesses sat in a private viewing box, their expressions ranging from smug amusement to quiet interest. Velkara, the eldest, leaned forward, arms crossed. "This will be over in minutes." Silenus smirked. "I almost feel bad for him. Almost." Jari laughed. "Watch, he'll try to surrender the moment he sees his opponent." But Selva, the youngest, remained silent, her violet eyes fixed on Ethan with something resembling curiosity. The royal champion arrives. The air shook as massive doors opened on the other side of the arena. From the shadows emerged a towering figure, at least 10 feet tall, clad in thick armor of obsidian and gold. His forearms flexed, muscles rippling as he gripped two massive plasma axes. His crimson eyes locked onto Ethan, filled with the kind of killing intent that could make lesser men tremble. Lord Veros announced the challenger's name. "Behold the royal champion, General Vrogar the Unyielding." A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Vrogar was not just any warrior. He was a legend, a veteran of over 100 wars, undefeated in battle, feared across the empire. His title, Unyielding, had been earned through years of merciless victories. Velkara grinned. "This is perfect. No human could ever defeat him." Silenus laughed. "Vrogar won't even use both axes. One will be enough." Jari cracked her knuckles. "Shame. I was hoping for a longer fight." Even Selva looked concerned now. Ethan stared up at the massive alien warrior. "Ha. Of course. Because a normal fight would be too easy, right? A fight for survival." Veros raised his hand. "The trial of worthiness begins. Now." The moment the words left his lips, Vrogar charge. Ethan barely had time to react before a massive plasma axe swung toward his head. He ducked just in time, feeling the heat of the blade as it cut through the air. Vrogar didn't pause. He swung again, faster than something that big had any right to move. Ethan rolled to the side, barely avoiding death. The ground where he had been standing exploded into molten rock. The crowd roared, expecting the fight to end any second. But Ethan wasn't some helpless diplomat. He was a survivor, a fighter. He knew he couldn't overpower Vrogar. The Selveni warrior was bigger, stronger, and more experienced. But Ethan had something that Selveni didn't: human unpredictability. A different kind of combat. Vrogar came at him again, raising both axes for a finishing blow. But Ethan didn't dodge backward. He rushed forward. The move caught everyone, including Vrogar, off guard. Instead of retreating like a normal fighter, Ethan got inside Vrogar's guard, where the champion's massive weapons were harder to use. Then Ethan slammed his knee into Vrogar's stomach. It was like hitting a steel wall. But Ethan didn't stop. He jabbed at a weak spot on the Selveni's side, right beneath the ribs, a pressure point that human martial arts exploited. Vrogar grunted in surprise and staggered back. The audience gasped. Velkara's eyes widened slightly. Did he just land a hit? Silenus frowned. That was just luck. Jari stopped laughing. Vrogar doesn't get hit. Selva watched intensely, fingers gripping the armrest of her seat. Vrogar recovered, snarling. Clever, human, but it won't save you. He came at Ethan again, swinging faster now. Ethan had to be twice as fast just to keep up. He dodged, rolled, ducked, anything to avoid the deadly axes. He used his smaller size, his agility, and his experience in dirty fighting. Then he saw an opening. Vroger overcommitted to a downward swing. Ethan sidestepped, then kicked Vroger's knee. The Tselvanni warrior stumbled, for the first time in his career. The impossible happens. A stunned silence fell over the arena. Velkera rose from her seat. What? Silena's smirk had vanished. Jari's claws twitched. Xelva leaned forward, her expression unreadable. Ethan didn't stop. He pressed the advantage, dodging a wild swing and striking at the joint between Vroger's shoulder plates. A precise hit, a weakness most warriors would overlook. Vroger roared in pain. Ethan twisted around him, grabbed the warrior's massive helmet, and using the momentum of his own fall, smashed Vroger's face into the ground. The impact shook the arena. For a long moment, nothing moved. Then, Vroger didn't rise. Silence. The greatest warrior in the Empire had been defeated. The aftermath. Ethan pushed himself up, breathing hard. His body ached, but he was alive. The crowd was completely frozen. Then one noble stood up and clapped. Then another, and another. Soon, the entire arena was roaring in approval. Velkera clenched her fists, her golden eyes burning with a mixture of anger and something else. Silenis stared in disbelief. Jari had gone completely silent. And Selva smiled. Just a little. Ethan wiped blood from his lip and looked up at the princesses. Still think I'm weak. Velkera narrowed her eyes. This isn't over. Ethan grinned. Oh, I know. Because now, things had changed. He was no longer just the human nobody. He had proven himself, and the entire Tselvanni Empire knew it. The princesses conspire. Can they escape Ethan? The Tselvanni royal arena had never been this silent before. Ethan Carter stood in the center, bruised and bleeding, but victorious. The mighty Vroger, the unyielding, lay defeated at his feet. The greatest warrior in the Empire, beaten by a human. The shock of the moment still lingered in the air. Thousands of Tselvanni nobles, warriors, and dignitaries were still frozen, processing what had just happened. Then, as if breaking free from an invisible spell, they erupted in deafening cheers. Ethan barely heard them. His body ached, his breathing was ragged, but one thought burned in his mind. I did it. I actually did it. He looked up at the royal balcony, where the 4 alien princesses sat. Their reactions told him everything. Velkera, the eldest, was stone-faced, her golden eyes hiding whatever emotions she was feeling. Silenis, the second, had gone from smug amusement to utter disbelief. Jari, the third, sat with clenched fists, her sharp claws digging into her seat. Selva, the youngest, was watching him with curiosity. Not anger, not hatred, something else. Ethan let out a long breath. This isn't over. Not by a long shot. The aftermath. A new power shift. As the arena crowd continued roaring, Lord Veros stepped forward, his regal robes flowing behind him. He raised his hand, and the noise slowly died down. By the laws of the Tselvanni Empire, his voice rang out, Ethan Carter has proven his worth. He has bested the royal champion in combat. He turned to the princesses, his gaze sharp. And as decreed by the late King Selfar, you are now legally bound to him. The words rang like a death sentence. Velkera's nails dug into the armrest of her chair. Silenis's eyes flashed with fury. Jari bared her teeth, growling lowly. Zelva remained unreadable. The nobles murmured, some in excitement, some in confusion. This was unprecedented. A human, a mere outsider, had defied all expectations. Ethan smirked. Well, that'll shut them up for a while. But he knew this was just the beginning of a much bigger problem. Back at the royal palace, the princess's plot. That night, deep within the luxurious chambers of the royal palace, the four princesses sat in a private meeting room, their expressions dark with anger and frustration. The walls were lined with gold-trimmed banners, ancient Selveni artifacts, and glowing orbs that cast an eerie blue light across the room. The air was thick with tension. Velkara spoke first, her voice low and controlled. "This is unacceptable." Jari slammed her fist onto the table. "This is an insult. That human," she spat the word like venom, "humiliated us in front of the entire empire." Silenus's fingers tapped against the table, her mind racing. "We should have killed him the moment the will was read." Zelva, the youngest, finally spoke. "We underestimated him." The room fell silent. Velkara's golden eyes flickered to her youngest sister. "What are you saying?" Selva's voice was calm, measured. "He's not just some lucky human. He knew how to fight Frogger. He adapted to our combat style, exploited weaknesses. He's not weak." Jari scoffed. "You almost sound like you respect him." Zelva leaned back, unbothered. "I respect his ability to survive. That doesn't mean I accept him as our master." Velkara exhaled sharply. "Enough of this. We need to find a way out of this mess." Silenus narrowed her eyes. "I have an idea." The plan. Framing Ethan. A sinister smirk spread across Silenus's face. "If we can't kill him without being branded as traitors, we discredit him." Velkara leaned forward. "Go on. We frame him for treason." Silenus continued. "Make it look like he's conspiring with the enemies of the empire. The nobles may tolerate him for now, but if they believe he's a threat, they'll turn against him." Jari grinned. "And then we'll be free of him." Zelva tapped her chin. "It's risky. If he's as clever as he seemed in that fight, he might see through it." Velkara's voice was cold, decisive. "Then we make sure the evidence is undeniable." Meanwhile, Ethan's growing suspicion. Ethan stood on a balcony overlooking the Selveni capital, the glow of neon lights stretching into the horizon. His body was still sore from the fight, but his mind was sharper than ever. He wasn't stupid. He knew the princesses wouldn't accept their fate easily. He could almost feel them plotting against him. I'd do the same in their position. The problem was, he had no idea how they would try to get rid of him. Footsteps approached behind him. Turning, he saw Lord Veros, his hands clasped behind his back. Veros studied him for a moment before speaking. "You've done what no other human has, Ethan Carter." Ethan smirked. "Yeah. And now, I'm just waiting for the next attempt on my life." Veros' expression didn't change. "You are correct to be wary." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "You sound like you know something." Veros exhaled. "I know the princesses. They will not submit willingly." "Yeah, I got that part. But you should also know this." Veros stepped closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "The king did not choose you out of foolishness. He had a reason that goes beyond just his daughters." Ethan's stomach twisted. "What do you mean?" Veros hesitated. Then he shook his head. "You must be careful, Ethan Carter. You have more enemies than you realize. Some are closer than you think." And with that, the old royal executor walked away, leaving Ethan with a sinking feeling in his chest. The trap is set. The next morning, news spread across the empire. Heir accused of treason. Secret ties to the rebellion. Ethan sat in his chambers, staring at the glowing holoscreen in front of him. There in bold letters was his name, tied to an elaborate conspiracy. Documents had been found. Secret messages traced back to his personal communication devices. A fabricated plot showing that he was working with Selveni rebels to overthrow the empire. And the evidence was airtight. Ethan leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. Well, that didn't take long. He had just stepped into a war he didn't even know he was part of. And the worst part, the princesses had played their hand perfectly. The empire betrays the princesses. Ethan returns. The trial of treason begins. Ethan Carter sat in the center of a massive Selveni courtroom, shackled in heavy energy restraints. His wrists burned from the glowing red cuffs, suppressing his strength, making it impossible to fight back. His expression remained calm, but his mind was racing. He had faced death before. He had fought in dark alleys, on war-torn planets, in space battles where one wrong move meant oblivion. But this was a political execution in the making. Before him, seated on a massive elevated throne, was Lord Rethis, High Judge of the Selveni Empire. His sharp reptilian features were etched with cold authority, his golden robes shimmering under the dim blue light of the courtroom. The chamber was filled with hundreds of nobles, warriors, and high-ranking officials, all gathered to witness the trial of the Empire's first human heir. Standing across from Ethan were the four princesses, Velkera, Silenus, Jari, and Selva. They had set him up perfectly. Documents, messages, forged communications, all showing that Ethan had been conspiring with rebels to overthrow the Selveni Empire. The princesses had moved swiftly, ensuring that every noble in the room already believed him guilty. Velkera, standing tall, addressed the High Judge. Ethan Carter is a danger to the Empire. We cannot allow an outsider to claim our throne. Silenus added, the evidence speaks for itself. He is working with the rebels. He must be executed immediately. Jari smirked. Let's not waste time. He's already lost. Ethan leaned back in his chair, suppressing a grin. You have no idea what's coming. The betrayal. The High Judge raised his hand, silencing the courtroom. Ethan Carter, you have been accused of high treason. Do you deny these charges? Ethan tilted his head. Oh, absolutely. This is the worst setup I've ever seen, and I've been in a few. The crowd murmured in outrage. Velkera glared. Enough games, human. Ethan shrugged. Why would I betray an empire I never wanted to rule in the first place? The High Judge's golden eyes narrowed. For a brief moment, Ethan saw something. Doubt. Hesitation. Then something happened that no one expected. One of the high-ranking generals in the room, a towering battle-scarred Selveni named Lord Rightful, stood up. This trial is a waste of time, he declared. Ethan Carter is guilty. We should execute him now. Velkera smirked. Finally, someone with sense. But then, Lord Rightful turned to the princesses. And when he is gone, you will be next. Silence. Velkera's smirk vanished. What? Rightful stepped forward, his heavy boots echoing in the quiet chamber. Do you think we, the noble houses, will allow the daughters of Selfar to remain in power after this disgrace? He sneered. You bonded yourselves to a human, and now you try to cover your failure with his death. The Empire will never follow you. The realization hit the princesses like a thunderstrike. They had played their move, but they were not the only ones playing the game. The true coup revealed. Ethan watched the scene unfold, keeping his expression neutral. He had suspected something was off. The setup was too perfect, too fast. Now, the truth was coming out. This trial was never about him. It was about power. Velkera clenched her fists. We are the rightful heirs. Rightful laughed. You were, before your father tied you to a human. Asterisk, 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 but now you're an embarrassment. Weak. You have no claim to the throne anymore. Silenus snarled. We are still of royal blood. Rightful stepped closer, eyes gleaming. And you think that matters? He turned to the High Judge. I propose an alternative. Kill the human. Kill the princesses. The Empire does not need weak rulers. The High Judge hesitated. Velkera felt her stomach drop. They had thought they were playing the game, but they had just been pieces on the board. Ethan grinned. Well, looks like you all just got screwed. Ethan's escape. The storm breaks. The room erupted into chaos. The princesses realized that if they didn't act now, they were as good as dead. Jari's claws extended. her instincts screaming that they were being hunted. Silenus reached for her hidden dagger. Velkera, still in shock, turned to the High Judge. "You cannot allow this." The High Judge hesitated, then opened his mouth to speak. Boom! The entire chamber shook violently as an explosion rocked the upper levels. Alarms blared. Ethan used the distraction. With a single precise movement, he dislocated his thumb, slipping out of the energy cuffs. Guards rushed forward. Too slow. Ethan grabbed one's weapon, spun it around, and fired, hitting another guard square in the chest. The room exploded into chaos. Princesses dove for cover, the nobles panicked, and the High Judge shouted orders. Ethan ducked, using the confusion to his advantage. The palace was under attack. But by whom? Then he saw her, a figure in sleek black armor, dual energy blades humming at her sides. A Selvani warrior, but not from the Empire. A rebel. She met Ethan's eyes and gave a single nod. "Time to go, human." Ethan smirked. Finally, someone with good timing. The princess's decision. Velkera grabbed Silenus's wrist. "We need to run." Jari cursed. "Where?" "There's nowhere safe." Selva watched Ethan, her mind racing. He was escaping. And at that moment, she made a decision. "We go with him. Asterisk, 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 asterisk. He's our only chance." Velkera whipped around. "What? Are you insane?" Selva's violet eyes burned with certainty. "Would you rather die here?" Velkera gritted her teeth. Then she made the hardest choice of her life. "Fine, but if he betrays us, I'll kill him myself." The four princesses turned and ran after the one person they had once sworn to destroy. The final battle. Ethan claims his destiny. The escape through the burning capital. That Selvani capital was in chaos. Explosions shook the palace as rebels stormed through the corridors, cutting down imperial guards with ruthless efficiency. The grand spires of the imperial city, once symbols of unshakable power, were now engulfed in smoke and fire. Ethan ran through the carnage, his heart pounding. The rebel warrior in black armor, Soraya, led the way, slicing down any guards who got too close. Behind him, the four princesses followed, stuck in the same nightmare they had created. Velkera, the proud warrior princess, was fuming, but she kept up without hesitation. Silenus, the cunning strategist, gritted her teeth, realizing how badly they had been played. Jari, always quick to anger, now had her rage focused on the real enemy, the empire that had just betrayed them. Zelva, the quiet observer, had already figured it out. Ethan was now their best chance at survival. They had tried to destroy him. Now, they were running for their lives by his side. "Where the hell are we going?" Ethan shouted over the roar of battle. Soraya didn't slow down. "Your ship. It's still docked at the eastern spaceport." Ethan cursed. "Yeah, except that place is probably swarming with guards." Soraya gave him a wild grin. "Then we fight our way through." Velkera scowled. "This is madness." Ethan turned to her with a smirk. "Welcome to my world, princess." The betrayal runs deeper. Meanwhile, back in the palace, Lord Requin and his conspirators watched the city burn. A holographic display showed Ethan and the princesses escaping. Requin sneered. "Let them run. They won't get far." One of his officers bowed. "The fleet is already in position, my lord. The moment they reach orbit, they'll be wiped from existence." Requin nodded. "Good. Once they're dead, the Empire will belong to us." The High Judge hesitated. "And the nobles. The Council will not accept your rule so easily." Requin's smile was cold. "By the time they realize what happened, it will be too late. The Empire was already his." Or so he thought. The battle at the spaceport. The eastern spaceport was a war zone. Imperial troops were everywhere, setting up barricades and turret emplacements to stop any attempts to escape. Ethan and his team arrived at the edge of the battlefield, taking cover behind a burning transport ship. Jari peered out, cursing. Damn it. That's a full battalion. Velkara checked her energy rifle. We don't have the firepower for this. Silenus smirked. We don't need firepower. We need a distraction. Ethan grinned. You know, I like how you think, princess. Soraya tossed him a detonator. I hope you're good at making things explode. Ethan's grin widened. Oh, you have no idea. The explosion that changed everything. The first blast tore through the enemy barricade, sending Selvani soldiers flying. Before the dust had even settled, Ethan and his team charged. Velkara was the first into the fight, her energy blade slicing through enemy lines. Silenus moved with precision, her blaster firing pinpoint shots that took down high-ranking officers. Jari leaped onto a gunner's nest, ripping the turret from its base and turning it against the enemy. And Selva, the quietest of them all, moved like a shadow, disabling enemies with cold, calculated efficiency. Ethan was a storm. He fought like a human berserker, using tactics that Selvani had never seen before. Dirty tricks, feints, and misdirection. Explosives thrown at just the right moments. He wasn't fighting like an emperor. He was fighting like a survivor, and it was working. The Selvani forces broke, their lines falling apart under the unexpected assault. Soraya ran up to Ethan. Your ship is clear, but we have a problem. Ethan turned to where she was pointing. A fleet of warships had arrived in orbit, and they were already charging their weapons. The final stand. Velkara looked up at the sky, her golden eyes narrowing. They're going to destroy the whole damn city just to kill us. Silenus growled. We need to leave. Now. Ethan's mind raced. They had one chance to escape, but if they ran now, the rebels below would be wiped out. The Empire was falling into the hands of monsters, and if Requin won, the Selvani people were doomed. Ethan looked at the princesses. We need to stop that fleet. Jari scoffed. And how the hell do you plan to do that? Ethan grinned. We steal a warship. Velkara blinked. You're insane. Ethan clapped her on the shoulder. Took you this long to figure that out. The heist of the century. Instead of boarding his small personal ship, Ethan and his team stormed an Imperial dreadnought. The massive battleship, the Wrath of Selfar, was meant to be the lead ship of Requin's fleet. Now, it was about to be stolen. The fighting inside the ship was intense, but Ethan's unexpected tactics and the princess's elite training proved too much for the unsuspecting crew. In less than an hour, the bridge was under Ethan's control. He sat in the command chair, grinning as he cracked his knuckles. All right, let's blow some bastards out of the sky. The war begins. With Ethan at the helm, the Wrath of Selfar turned on the rest of Requin's fleet. Massive cannons fired, tearing through enemy ships. Ethan, using Earth-style tactics, pulled off maneuvers that Selvani never expected. In a matter of minutes, Requin's fleet was in disarray. Then, Ethan sent out a message to the Empire. This is Ethan Carter, rightful heir of the Selvani throne. The corrupt officials who betrayed your king will answer for their crimes. The rebellion is not your enemy. I am not your enemy. But if you stand against me, I will destroy you. The message shook the Empire. Across the galaxy, Selvani forces began turning against Requin's rule. And on the battlefield, Requin himself realized he had lost. The princess's final choice. As the battle ended, Velkara stood beside Ethan on the bridge. She looked at him, truly looked at him, not as a human, not as an outsider, but as a leader. You really are something else, aren't you? She murmured. Ethan smirked. You just figuring that out now. Velkara took a deep breath. I still don't like you. Ethan shrugged. I'll live. She hesitated, then placed a hand on his shoulder. But maybe, just maybe, you were meant to be here after all. Ethan grinned. Guess I just inherited an empire. The new king. Earth rises in power. The aftermath of war. The battle had ended, but the weight of what had just transpired was only beginning to settle in. From the massive windows of the Dreadnought's bridge, Ethan Carter gazed at the ruins of the Selveni capital. Smoke still rose from the lower districts where battles had raged. The shattered remains of Riquan's fleet drifted in orbit, burning wrecks tumbling in the darkness. The Selveni Empire had been saved, but it had changed forever. Behind him, the four princesses stood together, silent. For the first time, they weren't standing against him. They stood with him. Velkara's arms were crossed, her usual arrogant confidence dimmed by the sheer gravity of the situation. "So, what happens now, human?" Ethan exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. "Hell if I know. I was hoping you'd have an answer." Jari scoffed. "We won the battle, but the Empire is still broken." Silenus sighed. "Riquan is dead. His conspirators have fled, but the noble houses will be desperate to seize power." Zelva, the youngest, finally spoke, her voice quiet but certain. "They need a leader." A heavy silence followed. Velkara turned to Ethan. "They expect you to take the throne." Ethan froze. The throne. He had fought. He had survived. He had led an entire fleet to victory, but he never wanted to rule a Dan empire. His gut twisted at the thought. "I didn't come here to be an emperor. I just wanted to survive this mess." Silenus arched a brow. "You think the Empire cares what you want?" Jari nodded. "You're already their leader, whether you like it or not." Ethan sighed, looking back out at the ruined city below. "What the hell am I supposed to do now?" A galaxy in chaos. The message had already spread across the Empire. Riquan was dead. The princesses had sided with a human. The once mighty Selveni Empire was now at a crossroads. Across the vast stretches of space, factions prepared to move. Rebellions that had long been suppressed saw an opportunity. Allied planets waited, unsure if they should pledge loyalty to Ethan or break away entirely. The Galactic Council, the ruling body of many major empires, viewed the situation with suspicion. The power vacuum was growing. If Ethan didn't take control, someone else would. And it wouldn't be someone with good intentions. The final decision. The princesses stood before Ethan, waiting for his answer. Velkara's gaze was sharp. "You don't have a choice. If you walk away now, the Empire collapses." Ethan ran a hand through his hair. "You're seriously telling me that a human, an outsider, should rule over an entire alien empire?" Silenus smirked. "It's already happened. You might as well embrace it." Jari nodded. "You fought for this. You bled for this. You earned it." Ethan looked at Selva, the quietest of them all. She met his gaze calmly. "If you don't lead, we'll go back to war. More will die. The people need someone who can bring stability." Ethan closed his eyes for a moment, thinking. This wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about the future of an empire. He sighed and looked at them. "All right, but I'm not doing this alone." Velkara raised an eyebrow. "Meaning?" Ethan smirked. "You four are going to help me run this damn thing."